My name is Samantha, and at 34 years old, I never imagined a neighborhood barbecue would become the moment my marriage ended. As I sit here packing boxes in what used to be our bedroom, listening to birds singing outside our suburban home, I keep replaying that Saturday afternoon when my husband Tom made his famous wife trade joke with our neighbor Derek. The thing is, when Derek took him seriously and I accepted, it wasn't about revenge. It was about finally having enough self-respect to stop being the punchline. Before I share what happened that changed everything, let me know where you're watching from, and please subscribe if you believe in standing up for yourself. Tom and I had been married for 8 years together, for 12 total. We met in college when I was studying elementary education and he was finishing his business degree. Back then, his confidence seemed attractive. He could walk into any room and own it within minutes. His charm was magnetic, the way he could make everyone laugh, how he always had the perfect story for every occasion. He was the guy everyone wanted at their party, the one who could sell ice to an Eskimo, as his sales manager loved to say. I should have paid attention to the early warning signs. During our college days, his humour had an edge that I dismissed as playful teasing. At parties, he would introduce me as his girlfriend, who was studying to be a teacher, then add with a wink that someone had to pursue the noble profession, since it certainly wasn't going to make us rich. His fraternity brothers would laugh, and I would force a smile, telling myself he was just joking. When we moved in together after graduation, the jokes evolved. He would tell his colleagues about how I burned pasta water, once turning it into an elaborate tale that grew more exaggerated with each telling. At dinner parties, he would pat my hand and say I was simple but sweet, like vanilla ice cream, nothing fancy but reliable. Everyone would chuckle and I would sit there, my face hot, wondering why being compared to ice cream in front of his pharmaceutical sales team felt so diminishing. His career took off quickly. Within 3 years, he was regional sales manager, pulling in 6 figures, while I was making $35,000 teaching 3rd grade. He managed our finances, giving me what he called an allowance for groceries and personal needs. When I wanted to buy new books for my classroom, I had to present my case like I was asking for venture capital funding. He would make a show of considering it, then usually approve it with a comment about supporting his wife's little teaching hobby. Our social circle consisted almost entirely of his work colleagues and their spouses. The women were mostly stay-at-home mums or worked part-time in boutiques and yoga studios. They wore designer clothes and talked about their latest vacations to Cabo and Aspen. I would sit quietly during these gatherings, nursing a single glass of wine, while Tom regaled everyone with stories about my latest teaching mishap, or how I cried during a commercial about homeless puppies. We lived in Willowbrook Estates, an upscale subdivision where lawn care was competitive and homeowners association meetings were treated like congressional hearings. The houses were all variations of the same colonial style, with 3-car garages and professionally landscaped yards. Tom insisted we needed to live there for his image, even though the mortgage payment was more than my entire yearly salary. 6 months before everything changed, Derek Morrison moved into the house next door. He was a quiet architect in his early 40s, recently divorced with a teenage daughter named Michelle, who visited on weekends. Unlike the other neighbours who treated their lawns like putting greens, Derek planted a vegetable garden in his backyard. I would see him out there in the evenings, carefully tending to his tomatoes and peppers, completely absorbed in the simple act of growing something. We started talking over the fence one evening when I was watering my own small flower garden, the only part of our yard Tom allowed me to manage. Derek asked about my roses, genuinely interested in the variety I had chosen. We discovered we both loved reading, and he recommended a book about the history of architecture that I devoured in 2 days. He would leave fresh vegetables on our porch with notes about the best ways to prepare them. These small gestures felt like oxygen in my suffocating world. Tom noticed the friendship developing and turned it into new material. He started calling Derek my teacher's pet, joking about how the divorced neighbour was probably hoping to get some extra credit. At a dinner party, he told everyone that Derek and I were starting a book club for nerds who couldn't handle real entertainment. The laughter around the table felt like tiny cuts, each one drawing a little more blood from my dignity. The 4th of July barbecue was an annual tradition in our neighbourhood, and that year it was our turn to host. I spent 3 days making potato salad from scratch, marinating meat, baking 2 kinds of pie, decorating the backyard with red, white, and blue streamers. I strung lights through the trees, set up tables with checkered tablecloths, arranged flowers in mason jars as centerpieces. Every detail was perfect because I knew Tom would find fault with something, and I wanted to minimize the ammunition. Tom's contribution was buying beer and sending a group text to his work buddies. The morning of the party, he walked through my preparations with the air of a quality control inspector. The streamers were crooked, he said. The potato salad needed more mayo. Why did I make apple pie when everyone knew cherry was more patriotic? Each criticism was delivered with a smile, as if he was doing me a favour by pointing out my failures. Guests started arriving around 2 in the afternoon, 25 neighbours plus Tom's sales team and their families. The yard filled with the sound of laughter and kids playing. Tom immediately went into performance mode, stationing himself by the grill, with a beer in hand, holding court with stories about his latest sales conquest and predictions about the company's expansion into European markets. I busied myself with hosting duties, refilling drinks, bringing out more food, making sure everyone was comfortable. Tom would occasionally call out to me across the yard. "Hey, honey, tell everyone about the time you thought the school fire drill was real and evacuated your class in the middle of a spelling test." Or "Sweetheart, show everyone that dress you bought on clearance that you thought was such a deal until you realised it was missing a button." Each time the crowd would laugh, and I would smile and play along, dying a little more inside. When Derek arrived around 4, he brought a bottle of homemade wine from grapes he had grown himself. He found me in the kitchen, arranging a fruit tray, and complimented the garden, saying the roses looked especially beautiful this year. It was the first genuine compliment I had received all day. Tom must have noticed through the window, because he appeared moments later, wrapping his arm around my waist, possessively. "Derek, buddy," he said, too loudly. "Already, several beers in, I see you found my wife. Can't blame you, she does make a mean fruit tray. It's one of her special skills, cutting things into bite-sized pieces. Must be all that practice with the kindergarten snacks." Derek's face remained neutral, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Sympathy, maybe, or recognition. As the afternoon wore on, Tom's jokes got sharper and his voice got louder. He gathered a crowd to tell the story of how I had cried when I couldn't figure out how to use the new smart TV remote. He described in elaborate detail how I had called him at work, sobbing about technology being too complicated, how he had to leave an important meeting to come home and show me which button turned on Netflix. The story was a complete fabrication, but everyone laughed anyway. During dinner, he announced to the table that I had been rejected from the master's program I had applied to, even though I hadn't heard back yet. He said it was probably for the best, since I could barely handle third graders. Imagine if I had to write a thesis. The humiliation was so complete that I excused myself to the kitchen, standing over the sink, gripping the counter until my knuckles went white. Derek followed me in quietly, picking up a dish towel and starting to dry the plates I had been washing. "You don't have to take that," he said softly. I kept my eyes on the soapy water. "Yes, I do," I whispered. "You don't understand what he's like when there's no audience, at least when people are around. He stops at words." Derek set down the towel and looked at me directly. "Samantha, nobody deserves to be treated like that. Nobody." Before I could respond, Tom's booming voice called from outside. "Where's my wife? Did she get lost in her own kitchen? Time for the fireworks, people." The sun was starting to set, casting golden light across the yard. Tom stood on the deck, tapping a beer bottle with a knife to get everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, neighbours and friends," he began, swaying slightly. "I want to thank you all for coming to our humble celebration." He paused for effect, grinning at the crowd. "You know, I've been thinking about what makes this neighbourhood so special." He took another swig of beer. "We've got successful people, beautiful homes, great kids. But you know what would make it absolutely perfect?" He looked around, building suspense. "We should pitch a reality show. Willowbrook Wife Swap." The crowd tittered nervously. "Think about it. We could shake things up, see how everyone functions with a different spouse for a week." His eyes landed on Derek. "Take our friend Derek here. Poor guy's been bachelor living since his divorce. House probably smells like takeout and loneliness. He needs a woman's touch. Meanwhile, I've got Samantha here, who's basically a professional mum with all those kids she teaches." Derek's jaw tightened, but Tom was just warming up. "Tell you what, Derek," Tom continued, his voice carrying across the yard. "I'll make you a deal. I'll trade you Samantha for that boat you've got, and your Porsche. Hell, I'll even throw in her teaching supplies as a bonus. You know, the construction paper and glitter she's always leaving around the house." The silence was deafening. A few people laughed uncomfortably. Tom, oblivious or uncaring, pressed on. "She's low maintenance, really. Just needs romance novels and wine. Feed her twice a day, let her watch those teaching videos on YouTube, and she's good to go. Great with kids, obviously. Comes with a warranty too. If she cries more than 3 times a week, you can return her." He walked over to where I was standing, putting his arm around me, squeezing my shoulder too hard. "What do you say, buddy? She can organise your house with those little labelled bins she loves. She'll make you those sandwiches with the crusts cut off. Only talks back during her book club nights, and even then it's just about fictional characters. She's like a certified pre-owned wife. One owner gently used all maintenance records available." My entire body was trembling. Years of humiliation crashed over me in waves. The miscarriage joke he had told at his company dinner, making light of the worst experience of my life. The time he told his boss I was simple but pretty like a decorative vase. The anniversary he forgot but turned into a running gag for months about how wives always remember meaningless dates. Derek set down his drink very deliberately. He looked at me, really looked at me, seeing past the forced smile to the woman drowning underneath. Then he turned to Tom. "I accept your offer," he said, clearly, his voice cutting through the nervous laughter. "But only if Samantha agrees to the trade." The entire party went silent. Someone dropped a plastic cup, and it seemed to echo in the stillness. Tom laughed loud and harsh. "Good one, Derek. You almost had me there." But Derek wasn't smiling. He wasn't joking. He stood there, steady as stone, waiting. Tom's laughter started to falter. "Come on, man, it's a joke. You know, haha." But Derek just kept looking at me. "The choice is Samantha's," he said. "If she agrees to your trade, I accept your terms." I felt something shift inside me, like tectonic plates finally giving way after years of pressure. Every humiliation, every public embarrassment, every time I had smiled when I wanted to scream it all, crystallized into this single moment of clarity. I stepped away from Tom's grasp and faced the crowd of neighbours and strangers who had witnessed my degradation for years. "I accept Derek's acceptance of your offer," I said, my voice stronger than it had been in years. Tom's face went through a series of expressions like a television changing channels. Confusion, amusement, annoyance, and finally the beginning of real panic. "Honey, what are you talking about? Stop being dramatic. The joke's over," but I wasn't done. "No, Tom," I said, my voice carrying across the silent yard. "The joke's not over. The joke has been going on for 8 years. Every dinner party where you told people I was too simple to understand your work. Every time you explained to your friends that you kept me around because I was trainable. Every barbecue, every gathering, every single public moment where you traded my dignity for laughs." I turned to address the crowd, people who had laughed at Tom's jokes for years. You've all been witnesses to it. The time he told you about my miscarriage at the Christmas party, turning the loss of our baby into a comedy routine about how at least we saved money on diapers. The anniversary dinner where he gave a toast about how marrying down meant never having to worry about competition. The promotion celebration where he announced that my teaching salary was what he spent on golf clubs. Tom stepped toward me, his face flushing red. "Samantha, you're embarrassing yourself. Let's go inside and discuss this privately." But I held up my hand and he actually stopped, embarrassing myself. I laughed, and it felt like breaking through surface after being underwater. "That's rich coming from you. You want to know what's embarrassing?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out an envelope I had been carrying for 3 months. This acceptance letter to the Master's Program in Educational Leadership. Full scholarship, starting in August. I've been hiding it because I knew you'd turn it into another joke about me trying to be more than I am. The crowd was frozen drinks forgotten. In their hands, children hushed by their parents. Tom's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You applied without telling me. There's a lot I haven't told you, Tom, like the 3 credit cards you opened in my name. Maxed out. $27,000 in debt that I discovered when I tried to apply for a small loan to buy classroom supplies. Or the charges at the Marriott downtown during your sales conferences. Strange how those charges were for the nights you said you were staying with clients in Boston." His face had gone from red to white. The only sound was the distant pop of fireworks from another neighborhood. I continued, my voice steady. "The gambling debts to your bookie that you've been paying from our joint savings. The money you told me went to house repairs. $60,000, Tom. I have the receipts. I have screenshots of the text messages. Derek had moved closer, not touching me, just standing within reach if I needed support. Tom's work colleagues were already backing away, making excuses, gathering their families. His boss, Richard, looked particularly uncomfortable, probably reconsidering that promotion Tom had been bragging about. "Samantha, please." Tom's voice had lost all its bravado. "We can work this out. This is just a misunderstanding. You're overreacting to a harmless joke." Harmless. I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in years. "You traded me for laughs, Tom. You literally just tried to trade me to our neighbor for a boat and a car. And you know what? It's the best offer you've ever made. Because Derek offering to accept that trade with my consent shows more respect for my agency than you've shown in our entire marriage." The party was dissolving around us. Neighbors were quietly gathering their children, covering dishes, murmuring excuses about early mornings and bedtimes. Tom's crowd had vanished like smoke, leaving him standing alone in the middle of his own yard, surrounded by the debris of his collapsed kingdom. Derek turned to me and asked quietly, "Would you like me to walk you to your sister's house?" It was such a simple question, asked with such genuine concern that tears finally came. "Thank you," I said, "but I'll drive myself. I've been practicing being on my own for longer than I realized." I went inside, grabbed my purse and the bag I had secretly packed weeks ago, hidden in the back of my closet. Tom followed me, alternating between threats and pleas. "You can't leave. Where will you go? How will you survive without me? You need me, Samantha. You're nothing without me." I stopped at the door and looked back at him one last time. "You're right about one thing, Tom. I was nothing with you, because you made sure of that every single day. But I'm about to find out who I am without you, and I'm betting she's someone worth knowing." The last thing I heard as I drove away was Tom shouting in the driveway, still trying to explain to the remaining guests that it was all a joke, that I couldn't take a joke, that I'd be back once I calmed down. But I wasn't going back. The joke was over, and for the first time in years, I was the one who got to deliver the punchline. The next morning, I woke up in my sister Jennifer's guest room to 47 missed calls from Tom. The text messages ranged from rage to desperation to bargaining to threats and back to rage again. "You're having a breakdown. You've lost your mind. Come home immediately." "Then I'm sorry, baby. Please come back." Followed by, "You'll get nothing in the divorce. I'll destroy you." And finally, "I love you. We can work this out. Please don't throw away 8 years." Jennifer brought me coffee and sat on the edge of the bed. She had been waiting years for this moment, watching her little sister disappear piece by piece into Tom's shadow. She never pushed, never gave ultimatums, just stayed close enough to catch me when I finally fell. "The entire neighborhood is talking about it," she said. "Margaret, from 2 houses down, called to say she's been wanting to tell Tom off for years." By noon, Tom had escalated his tactics. Flowers arrived at Jennifer's door, not just a bouquet, but 4 dozen roses with a card that said, "You're my everything. Please come home." An hour later, a jewelry store delivery person showed up with a diamond bracelet I knew we couldn't afford. Jennifer turned them all away, creating a pile of rejected apologies on her porch. My phone buzzed with messages from unexpected sources. 3 women from the neighborhood reached out, sharing their own stories about Tom. Apparently, his jokes about me were just the tip of the iceberg. He had made inappropriate comments to Sandra about her post-pregnancy weight. He had told Beth's teenage daughter she was developing nicely at last year's pool party. He had suggested to Carol that she could do better than her husband, offering himself as an upgrade. Tom showed up at the school on Monday, making a scene in the parking lot. The principal, Mrs. Patterson, had to threaten to call security before he left. She found me in my classroom afterwards, shaking as I tried to prepare for my students. "Take all the time you need," she said. "We've got substitute coverage. Your job is secure." She paused at the door. "For what it's worth, Samantha, we've all been wondering when you'd finally have enough." Word had spread through the parent network faster than wildfire. By Tuesday, I had 3 offers of pro bono legal services from parents who were divorce attorneys. Maria Gonzalez, whose daughter Emma was in my class, sat me down during her lunch break. "He opened credit cards in your name without permission. That's fraud. The gambling debts and hidden spending are marital asset dissipation. You have grounds and you have proof. Let me help you." Derek kept a respectful distance, sending only one text. "If you need anything, I'm here. No pressure, no expectations, just support." It was more consideration than Tom had shown in years. His daughter Michelle stopped by Jennifer's house with a casserole her dad had made, saying he wanted to make sure I was eating. The simple kindness of it made me cry. Tom's mother called on Wednesday, her voice dripping with disapproval. "Marriage is work, Samantha. You don't just give up because of a few jokes. You're being too sensitive. He's a good provider." "What more do you want?" I hung up without responding. There was no point explaining to someone who had raised him that being a good provider didn't excuse emotional abuse. By Thursday, Tom had switched tactics again. His lawyer sent a formal letter demanding I return to the marital home and cease damaging his reputation with false accusations. Maria laughed when she read it. "He's panicking. Discovery is going to be very interesting when we subpoena his financial records and those hotel receipts." I found an apartment that weekend. It was small, just a 1-bedroom in a converted Victorian near the school, but it had large windows that let in streams of sunlight and a tiny balcony where I could grow flowers. The landlord, an elderly woman named Rose, said she had left her own husband 40 years ago. "Best decision I ever made, dear." The rent was exactly what I could afford on my teaching salary. Moving day came 2 weeks after the barbecue. Tom had strategically disappeared, probably on advice from his lawyer. I walked through the house that had never really been mine, taking only what I had brought into the marriage and what I had purchased with my own money. It fit into a small rental truck with room to spare. 8 years, and I could pack my life in 3 hours. I found things as I packed that told the real story of our marriage. Photos where my smile never reached my eyes. Cards I had saved from students that Tom had mocked. Books I had hidden because he said they made me look pretentious. My college diploma, which he had insisted on hanging in the laundry room because it wasn't impressive enough for the office. Jennifer helped me unpack in my new place. We hung my teaching awards on the living room wall, put my books on shelves where everyone could see them, displayed the thank you notes from students in a shadow box. "This looks like you," she said, standing back to admire our work. "For the first time in almost a decade, it looks like you actually live here." That night, alone in my own space, for the first time in my adult life, I sat on my tiny balcony with a glass of wine and the acceptance letter to the master's program. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Somewhere across town, Tom was probably telling someone new how his crazy wife couldn't take a joke. But I wasn't listening anymore. The audience had left the building. 3 months into the divorce proceedings, Tom's carefully constructed image had completely crumbled. He lost his biggest client after showing up drunk to a presentation, slurring through slides about market penetration while reeking of whiskey. His boss, Richard, who had witnessed the barbecue meltdown, put him on probation. The office gossip mill, which Tom had fed for years with stories about me, had turned him into its favourite subject. My master's programme started in August as planned. Walking onto campus with a backpack full of books, I felt like I was 18 again, but better. I had experience now, perspective, and most importantly, I had fought for this. My professors were impressed with my insights about educational inequality and classroom management. My classmates, many of them also working teachers, became a support network I hadn't known I needed. The divorce proceedings were revealing more than even I had expected. Maria's forensic accountant discovered Tom had been hiding money in offshore accounts, planning his exit strategy while keeping me financially dependent. The affair with his colleague Brittany had been going on for 2 years. She was 26, fresh out of college, impressed by his sales swagger and expense account. She was also pregnant. Derek and I developed a careful friendship. Saturday mornings we would meet at the farmer's market, walking through stalls of fresh produce and homemade bread. He would tell me about his architecture projects, designing sustainable homes for low-income families. I would share stories from my classroom, the breakthrough moments when a struggling student finally understood a concept. We talked about books, about our failed marriages, about starting over in middle age. His daughter, Michelle, started coming to me for help with her English essays. She was bright but uncertain, still processing her parents' divorce. We would sit at my kitchen table working through thesis statements and supporting evidence, but really talking about resilience and growth. "You're different from Dad's other friends," she said one afternoon. "You actually listen." Tom made one last grand gesture in October. He showed up at the school's fall festival where I was running the book fair booth. He had flowers, a speech prepared, and what he probably thought was his most charming smile. Parents and students watched as he approached some, pulling out their phones, sensing drama. "Samantha," he said loudly, ensuring maximum audience. "I made mistakes. I see that now. But we belong together. You complete me. Without you, I'm lost." He dropped to one knee, pulling out the original engagement ring I had left on the bathroom counter. "Give me another chance. I'll go to counselling. I'll change. I'll be the husband you deserve." The crowd held its breath. I looked at him kneeling there, performing repentance like it was another sales pitch, and felt nothing but pity. "Tom," I said calmly, "you're doing it again. You're making this a show, a performance. You're not sorry for how you treated me. You're sorry that there were consequences. Please get up and leave before security escorts you out." He stood slowly, his face cycling through emotions again. "You're making a mistake," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "You'll never find anyone else who'll put up with you. You're 34 years old, Samantha. Your chance at happiness is walking away." I smiled, really smiled for the first time in front of him in years. "My chance at happiness started the day I walked away from you, Tom. And as for finding someone else, I'm not looking. I found myself, and she's pretty amazing company." Security did end up escorting him out when he wouldn't leave. The other parents applauded. Mrs. Chen, whose son was in my class, bought $500 worth of books for the school library in what she called a celebration purchase. The story made its way through the school district, and somehow I became a folk hero for teachers trapped in bad marriages. My lawyer called the next week with good news. Tom had agreed to settle. The house would be sold, debts divided according to who actually incurred them, and I would receive alimony for 3 years while I finished my master's degree. He would take responsibility for the fraudulent credit cards. It wasn't everything, but it was freedom. The final divorce hearing was in November. Tom showed up with Brittany, her pregnancy showing under a designer dress. She looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and superiority, probably wondering how I had managed to keep him for 8 years. I wanted to warn her, to tell her that the charm was a trap, that the jokes would start soon, but she would have to learn that lesson herself. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense, had read all the documentation. She looked at Tom over her glasses when he tried to contest the alimony. "Mr. Peterson," she said, "you committed financial fraud against your wife, hid assets, and by your own admission at a public gathering tried to trade her like property. Consider yourself fortunate that Mrs. Peterson isn't pursuing criminal charges. The settlement stands." Walking out of the courthouse officially divorced, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in years. Tom brushed past me, with Brittany muttering something about gold diggers. I stopped and turned. "Tom," I called out. He looked back hopefully. "Good luck," I said sincerely. "I really mean that." He looked confused, then angry, then just tired, as he walked away with his new future probably already composing jokes about his crazy ex-wife. That evening, Derek invited me over for dinner. Not a date, just dinner between friends who had survived their own wars. Michelle was there, and we ate homemade pasta and talked about everything except marriage and divorce. As I was leaving, Derek touched my arm gently. "You know," he said, "when I accepted Tom's trade that day, I wasn't joking. I would have honoured it if that's what you wanted. Not because I wanted to own you, but because I wanted to show you that someone could see your worth, even if your husband couldn't." I squeezed his hand. "I know," I said. "That's why it meant everything." A year later, I stood at the podium of an educational conference, looking out at an audience of 200 teachers and administrators. My presentation was about innovative methods for supporting students from troubled homes, drawing from both research and personal experience. The woman introducing me mentioned my master's degree, my curriculum coordinator position, and the award-winning program I had developed for elementary emotional literacy. She didn't mention that I was Tom Peterson's ex-wife, the woman from the viral barbecue story that had somehow made its way onto social media and became a cautionary tale about emotional abuse, disguised as humour. That identity was fading, replaced by who I was becoming. The program I developed came from my own journey, teaching children to recognise when teasing crossed into cruelty, when jokes became weapons, when laughter came at someone else's expense. We used books, role-playing, and honest discussions about respect and boundaries. Parents reported their children standing up to bullies, refusing to be anyone's punchline. Tom had married Brittany 3 months after our divorce was finalised. I heard through the grapevine that she had already caught him in several lies about money. His jokes about her pregnancy weight had started before she even gave birth. The cycle was repeating, but faster this time. She had reached out to me once through Facebook, asking if the stories about our marriage were true. I simply sent her Maria's contact information and wished her well. Derek and I had progressed from friendship to something deeper, but we took it slow, like architects building on solid foundation instead of sand. He never made jokes at my expense, never dismissed my opinions, never treated me like a supporting character in his story. When he introduced me to people, it was as Samantha, the brilliant educator, not as his girlfriend, or worse, his upgrade. Michelle had started calling me her bonus mum, a term she invented that carried no obligation but all the affection. She was applying to colleges, writing essays about resilience and growth. Her main essay was about watching two broken families heal into something new and better. She got into her first choice school with a partial scholarship. The support group I started for emotional abuse survivors met monthly at the community centre. We called it Reclaiming the Narrative, and it grew from 5 women to 30 in 6 months. We shared stories, resources, and most importantly, validation, that the jokes weren't funny, the humiliation wasn't deserved, and leaving wasn't giving up, but taking control. One evening, a new member named Patricia shared her story. Her husband was a prominent lawyer who made her the punchline at every party. Last week, she said, tears streaming down her face, he offered to trade me to his golf buddy for a membership at the country club. Everyone laughed. I felt like I was dying inside, but I laughed too. The room nodded in understanding. We had all been there. You don't have to laugh, I told her. You don't have to be the good sport. Your pain is not entertainment. Your humiliation is not a comedy show. And anyone who truly loves you would never make you the joke. She looked at me with hope breaking through despair. It gets better, she asked. I thought about my small apartment with sunlight streaming through windows, my master's degree on the wall, Derek's gentle hands, Michelle's essays, my students' growth, the respect I had earned and, more importantly, demanded. Yes, I said firmly, it gets so much better, but first you have to stop being their audience. The conference presentation went perfectly. Teachers approached afterward with their own stories, their own struggles with partners who diminished them. One man said his wife constantly mocked his teaching career, calling it babysitting with a degree. A woman shared that her husband announced at Thanksgiving that she was too stupid to understand his engineering work. The stories were different, but the theme was the same: death by 1,000 cuts, all disguised as humour. That night, Derek and I sat on my balcony now, our balcony, since he had moved in 6 months earlier. We had taken our time making sure we were choosing each other and not just escaping our pasts. The apartment was full of books and architectural drawings, lesson plans and building models, evidence of 2 lives being lived fully. Tom's name came up less and less. When it did, it was without bitterness, just recognition of a chapter that led to better things. I heard he was already making jokes about Brittany being too focused on the baby, not fun anymore. His sales numbers were down. His reputation preceded him now. The man who literally tried to trade his wife had become his own punchline. Derek pulled me closer as the sun set. "You know what I love about us?" he asked. What I said, expecting something romantic. "We're not a joke," he said simply. "We're not a story for parties or a cautionary tale or anyone's entertainment. We're just us, and that's enough." He was right. After years of being material for someone else's comedy routine, being just us was more than enough. It was everything. Looking back, that 4th of July barbecue was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because it was pleasant or easy, but because it was the moment the performance ended and real life began. Tom's wife trade joke, meant to humiliate me one more time, instead became my Independence Day. He offered to trade me like property, and in doing so finally showed everyone, including me, exactly who he was. The joke in the end was on him. He traded away the one person who had genuinely loved him, who had stood by him, despite everything, who had been willing to disappear into his shadow just to keep peace. He traded me for laughs, and those laughs turned into whispers, then gossip, then a reputation he could never shake. I sometimes wonder if he ever understands what really happened that day. if he ever realizes that Derek taking him seriously wasn't the problem. The problem was that he had been serious all along, treating me like an object to be exchanged, a prop in his performance, a thing he owned rather than a person he loved. But mostly, I don't think about Tom at all. I think about my students' bright faces learning to stand up for themselves. I think about Michelle, studying architecture like her father, building dreams on solid ground. I think about Derek, who sees me not as material for stories, but as a complete person worthy of respect. I think about the women in my support group finding their voices and their exits. The lesson I carry forward, the one I share with anyone who needs to hear it, is simple but profound. When someone consistently makes you the punchline, they're telling you exactly what they think of you. Believe them, and then believe in yourself enough to stop laughing along. Your worth is not determined by someone else's humor. Your pain is not entertainment. Your life is not a comedy show for someone else's benefit. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be the joke anymore. That barbecue joke was supposed to be my humiliation. Instead, it became my liberation. Tom thought he was trading me away. In reality, he was setting me free. And freedom, it turns out, looks like a small apartment filled with sunlight, a career I'm proud of, people who respect me, and nights where the only laughter is genuine joy. The trade was completed, just not how anyone expected. Tom traded me for laughs and ended up alone with his echo. I traded my silence for my voice and gained everything that matters. And Derek, who understood the real value of what was being offered, simply stood ready to catch me if I fell while I learned to fly on my own. That's the thing about jokes that go too far. Sometimes they reveal truths that can't be taken back. Tom revealed he saw me as property. Derek revealed he saw me as a person. I revealed I was done being anyone's punchline. And in that moment of revelation, everything changed. The best trade I ever made was trading a life of being the joke for a life of being the author of my own story. And this story, the real one, the true one, doesn't need a punchline. It just needs an ending where the woman who was once traded like property becomes someone who knows her worth and will never settle for less again. So when people ask me about that famous barbecue, about the wife trade joke that went viral, I tell them the truth. It wasn't a joke that backfired. It was a mask that finally slipped. And when it did, everyone could see what had been hidden beneath Tom's charm all along, while I could finally see who I was without it. The joke's over now, and for the first time in my life, I'm not laughing. I'm living, and that's the best punchline of all. I often think about that moment when Derek said he accepted the trade if I agreed. In those few words, he showed more respect for my autonomy than Tom had in 8 years of marriage. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The neighbor who was supposedly accepting a trade was actually the only person acknowledging I had a choice in the matter. These days, when I teach my students about respect and boundaries, I use age-appropriate examples. But the lessons are the same ones I learned that July afternoon. No one has the right to make you feel small for someone else's entertainment. No one should trade your dignity for laughs. And if someone loves you, really loves you, they protect your heart, not use it as material. Derek proposed to me last month, not in front of an audience, not as a performance, just the two of us in our garden surrounded by the roses that had survived the transplant to our new home. He didn't make a speech about completing him or being his better half. He simply said, "Samantha, you've made your own happiness, and I'd be honored if you'd let me share it with you." I said yes, of course, not because I needed him, but because I wanted him. There's a difference, and it took me 35 years to learn it. The wedding will be small, just family and close friends. Tom won't be invited, obviously, though. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he joked about crashing it to object when the minister asks. Even now, he's still trying to make my life into his material. But the difference is, no one's laughing anymore. They just look uncomfortable and change the subject. My students don't know the whole story, of course. But they know Miss Peterson became Mrs. Morrison, and that she smiles more now. They know that Mr. Morrison brings her lunch sometimes, and that he looks at her like she hung the moon. They know that Michelle helps in the classroom on her breaks from college, and calls us both by our first names with such affection it makes my heart full. One of my students, a quiet girl named Lucy, who rarely spoke, came up to me after a lesson on standing up for yourself. "Miss Morrison," she said in her small voice, "my dad makes fun of my mum all the time, says she's not smart because she didn't go to college, makes her cry but then says she's too sensitive." I knelt down to her level. "That must be hard to watch," I said gently. She nodded. "I told her what you taught us. That jokes aren't funny if someone's crying, that love doesn't hurt on purpose." She said maybe you were right. 2 weeks later, Lucy's mum came to see me. She was leaving Lucy's father, she said. Her daughter had come home and told her about the lessons on respect and boundaries, about how jokes that hurt aren't jokes at all. She wanted to thank me for giving her daughter the words she herself had never had. This is why I do what I do now. Not just teaching math and reading and science, but teaching children to recognize their worth and demand respect. Teaching them that they don't have to be anyone's punchline, that their feelings matter, that love shouldn't come with conditions or casualties. The ripple effects of that barbecue continue to spread. Patricia from my support group left her lawyer husband and started her own practice. 3 other women in the group have since left their emotionally abusive partners. We celebrate each freedom like a birthday, marking the date they chose themselves over someone else's ego. Tom and Brittany's marriage lasted 18 months. She left him for the pediatrician who delivered their son. Apparently, the doctor didn't think her postpartum depression was comedy material. Tom's response was to create a stand-up routine about crazy ex-wives that he performed at a local comedy club's open mic night. A video of it went viral for all the wrong reasons. The comments section was brutal. The consensus was that he was the joke, not his material. I saw him last week at the grocery store. He was buying frozen dinners and beer, looking older and somehow smaller than I remembered. He saw me with Derek and Michelle, laughing over which ice cream to buy for our movie night. For a moment, our eyes met. I expected anger or bitterness, but all I saw was exhaustion. He looked like a man who had run out of material. Derek noticed and quietly moved between us, not aggressively, just protectively. Tom walked away without saying anything. Later, Derek asked if I was okay. I realized I was more than okay. I felt nothing, not anger, not sadness, not even pity, just nothing. He had become a stranger who happened to know my history. As I finish this story, sitting in the home, Derek and I bought together, watching him help Michelle with her senior architecture project. While I grade papers, I want to leave you with this thought. If you're sitting where I was, if you're the punchline in someone's comedy routine, if you're dying inside while others laugh at your expense, know this: you can change the script. It won't be easy. You'll be called sensitive, dramatic, unable to take a joke. You'll lose people you thought were friends. You'll face financial fear and emotional exhaustion, but on the other side of that fear is freedom. On the other side of that exhaustion is energy you never knew you had. On the other side of being the joke is being the author of your own story. That 4th of July, Tom thought he was making another joke at my expense. Instead, he handed me my Independence Day. He offered to trade me, and in doing so, gave me the gift of seeing clearly that I was never valued in the first place. That clarity, painful as it was, became my strength. So here's my question for you, the one I want you to think about and maybe share in the comments. Have you ever been someone's punchline? Have you ever laughed along while dying inside? What was your breaking point? What was your Independence Day? If you're still in that situation, still being traded for laughs, still shrinking yourself to avoid becoming material, I want you to know something. You deserve someone who protects your dignity, not exploits it. You deserve love that builds you up, not tears you down for entertainment. You deserve to be the hero of your own story, not the punchline in someone else's. Please like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. Share it with someone who might need to hear that they don't have to be the joke anymore. And remember, the best response to being traded for laughs is to trade up to self-respect. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being witnesses to my journey from punchline to protagonist. And most of all, thank you for understanding that sometimes the best thing that can happen is the worst joke someone ever tells. May you all find the courage to stop laughing when it hurts. May you find the strength to walk away from anyone who treats your pain as entertainment. And may you discover, as I did, that the moment you stop being the joke is the moment your real life begins. This was my Independence Day. When will yours be?